Before stories were told and temples built, there was silence. Vast, electric silence, broken only by the heartbeat of the earth. Lightning split the sky, fire devoured the forest, and somewhere in the dark, a trembling creature looked up and felt something new. Not fear, not hunger, something deeper, a sense of being seen by the world itself. Long before the word God existed, humanity whispered to the unknown. Every rustle in the grass, every flicker of flame, every breath of wind seemed alive, deliberate, watching. The first gods were not distant rulers of heaven. They were the shimmer of dawn on wet leaves, the echo of thunder rolling over stone, the warmth of fire that both saved and threatened life. To our ancestors, the world was not a place to live in, it was a presence to be in awe of. Somewhere between survival and wonder, between the hunt and the dream, the spark of faith was born. From that spark grew questions, not spoken aloud but carved into bone, painted onto cave walls, danced into the night. Who watched over them? Who decided the rhythm of rain and birth and death? They didn't have names for these forces yet, only reverence. Reverence became memory, and memory became myth. Every culture that ever walked the earth, from the tribes of the African savanna to the caves of Chauvet, from the valleys of Anatolia to the shores of the Pacific, carried the same seed of wonder. Different languages, different rituals, same gaze turned upward. Humanity evolved, but that upward gaze never faltered. We built fires, we built stories, and eventually we built gods. This is not just the story of religion. It is the story of us, of the moment we realized we were small, and instead of retreating, we reached for the stars. Our first gods were born not from power, but from awe. And their whispers still echo in myths, in symbols, in the quiet question of every human heart. Where did we come from? And who, if anyone, is listening? Because before faith was written, before belief was spoken, there was awe. And awe was enough. Now let's follow those whispers back through time to when the first sparks of divinity flickered in the darkness of the human mind. Awe was humanity's first language, a wordless recognition that something vast and mysterious existed beyond the reach of understanding. Long before scripture or sacrifice, there was only the heartbeat of the world and the quiet awareness that it was shared. In the beginning, that awe came from nature's theater. Thunder that shook the bones, waves that devoured the shore, the slow dying of the sun before night reclaimed the sky. For our ancestors, these were not coincidences of nature. They were living presences, unpredictable and powerful. The crack of lightning wasn't weather, it was will. The river's rise wasn't flood, it was hunger. The world itself seemed to breathe, to think, to feel. Somewhere in that trembling perception, the line between the human and the divine began to blur. We saw faces in clouds, voices in wind, and intent in the stars. This instinct, the tendency to find meaning in mind and everything, became the cradle of belief. It was not foolishness, it was survival. Seeing the world as alive meant respecting it, fearing it, asking for its mercy. Awe became the first law. Archaeologists can trace this awakening not through words, but through what was left behind. In the darkness of caves, early humans painted not landscapes, but beings, half animal, half divine, moving in rhythmic symmetry. These were not mere decorations, they were dialogues. Rituals painted in ochre and firelight, invitations to forces unseen. Burials tell the same story. Bodies laid gently with tools, beads, and food suggest belief in something beyond death, a journey continuing into another realm. Awe had expanded from the natural world to the mystery of existence itself. As firelight danced across cave walls, shamans emerged, figures who stood at the threshold between worlds. Through trance, rhythm, and smoke, they spoke with spirits of ancestors and beasts. To their communities, they were the interpreters of awe, the first storytellers of the sacred. What began as fear became fascination, then reverence, then ritual. Imagine the moment when someone, for the first time, looked into the flames and saw not destruction, but a messenger. Warmth that carried meaning. A spark that connected earth to something higher. Around that fire, humanity's first theology was born. Not written in words, but whispered in breath and gesture. The gods were not yet many, nor one. They were everywhere. From Africa's open plains to the icy tundras of Eurasia, this recognition bloomed in parallel. Without contact or scripture, distant peoples all spoke the same silent language of awe. The sacred was not something to be found. It was already there, woven into the rhythm of the earth itself. And as those ancient hearts beat in wonder beneath the stars, something irreversible happened. The human mind stepped beyond survival. We began to dream of meaning. We began to name the invisible. We began to believe. When humanity first gathered around the fire, something changed forever. The flames didn't just warm bodies, they illuminated thought. In that trembling circle of light, shadows danced across stone and the world seemed alive with presence. The fire became the heart of the human spirit, a place of story, safety, and something sacred. Every spark that leapt upward was a whisper to the sky. As we mastered flame, we mastered imagination. The firelight revealed more than faces. It revealed visions. Under its flickering glow, early humans entered trances, states between waking and dream, between body and spirit. Smoke curled toward the night sky like a prayer, carrying the invisible upward. It was here, anthropologists believe, that ritual was born. The caves tell us this story. Painted walls from tens of thousands of years ago show animals, spirits, and beings merging in motion. The dance of hunter and hunted, life and death, the sacred and the mortal intertwined. Some figures have antlers, wings, or multiple eyes. These were not depictions of daily life. They were encounters, visual conversations with the unseen world. The shamans who painted them were not artists, but translators of trance. Through rhythm, drumbeats, and chants, these early mystics crossed thresholds of perception. They believed that through smoke and song, they could walk between worlds. To plead with the spirits of rain, to thank the earth for game, to speak with ancestors who lingered in memory. The rituals were not performances, they were exchanges, an offering of breath to the breath of the world. Over time, those rituals became social anchors. A fire became a sanctuary, a circle became a temple. Communities formed identities around shared ceremony. Each gesture, the offering of food, the painting of symbols, the chant of names, strengthened the invisible bridge between humanity and the beyond. For the first time, belief was not private wonder, but collective truth. The spirits in the smoke were everywhere. Some resided in the mountains that watched over the tribes, others in the rivers that fed them, the beasts they hunted, or the wind that carried the seasons. The sacred was both intimate and immense. It could dwell in a single stone or in the endless sky. This worldview, now called animism, was humanity's first great religion. It declared that everything, every leaf, storm, and heartbeat possessed life and intent. To early humans, death did not sever this connection. The dead were simply moved to another form of existence. They lingered in smoke, in dreams, in the flicker of firelight. Rituals became a way to keep them close, to feed their memory, to keep the bond between worlds alive. When we gaze into a fire today, that same ancient instinct stirs within us, the sense that something beyond the flames is watching back. The spirits may have faded from our stories, but the feeling remains. It is in our songs, our ceremonies, our need to mark the invisible with meaning. Because long before gods had names, before temples and scriptures, humanity already believed, not in heaven above, but in the sacred that breathed beside us, rising and vanishing with the smoke. Firelight once danced with nameless spirits. But as our settlements grew and our stories deepened, those spirits began to take shape. The unseen gained form, first as whispers of beasts and storms, then as beings with faces, tempers, and names. Humanity's first gods were born not in temples, but in imagination, sculpted from clay, fear, gratitude, and memory. As tribes became villages, and villages grew into early civilizations, humanity began to mirror its social order onto the heavens. Just as kings ruled over people, the sky must have rulers too. The cosmos became a reflection of earthly life, a divine hierarchy overseeing the world below. The result was astonishing. The amorphous spirits of nature evolved into pantheons of gods, families of divine beings, each commanding their domain, their story, their will. In the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved civilization into clay, people raised their eyes to Anu, god of the heavens, and Enlil, lord of air and authority. The Sumerians shaped their understanding of the universe through divine genealogy, each god a link in a cosmic chain explaining creation, weather, love, war, and death. Their myths did not just describe the gods, they described humanity's place within a divine order. Across the desert sands of Egypt, divinity found new faces. The gods became guardians of the natural cycles that sustained life. Ra, the sun's eternal voyager; Isis, the mother and protector; Osiris, the dying and resurrected king. Death was not an ending but a continuation, a belief that reflected the yearly flooding of the Nile, the sun's rebirth, and the eternal rhythm of renewal. Here, gods became moral mirrors. They modeled justice, balance, and the cosmic law of Ma'at, the principle that kept chaos at bay. Religion became not only reverence but responsibility. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, sacred symbols hinted at devotion older than scripture. The Pashupati seal, showing a horned, meditating figure surrounded by beasts. This proto-Shiva, serene yet powerful, represented both creation and destruction, a balance at the heart of existence. Here, the divine was not distant, but immanent, present in all life, both human and animal. To the east, early Chinese traditions saw divinity in heaven, the cosmic force of harmony and order. Their Shangdi was not a god of form, but of principle, a spirit of balance between heaven, earth, and humanity. Even in abstraction, the same impulse stirred, to make sense of the unseen through symbol and meaning. Far across the ocean, in the lush jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya told of Itzamna, creator of the world, and Ixchel, goddess of fertility and the moon. Their gods were both creators and destroyers, reflections of the dual nature of the universe. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth was written not only in stars but in blood and sacrifice, acts of devotion to keep the cosmos alive. Through myth and ritual, the gods began to evolve with us. They embodied our hopes and fears, our triumphs and failures. The Sky Father protected and ruled, the Earth Mother nurtured and healed, the trickster shattered and remade. These archetypes appeared again and again across continents, across millennia, as if humanity were dreaming the same dream in 100 languages. In Greece, that dream reached poetic perfection. The Olympian gods were vivid, flawed, and utterly human. Zeus, the storm wielder; Athena, born of wisdom and war; Hades, sovereign of the dead, each reflected the complexity of the human spirit. The Greeks did not worship perfection, they worshipped reflection. Their gods were the mirror of our own virtues and vices, amplified to divine scale. Storytelling became the temple of the mind. Around the fire, elders recited the deeds of the gods, their loves, battles, betrayals, and sacrifices. Each story explained the world and, in doing so, defined what it meant to be human. Through myth, the sacred became knowable, and humanity became mythic. It was through narrative that the gods truly lived, not as distant watchers, but as mirrors of our own souls. As cities rose and empires expanded, belief grew more structured. Temples replaced caves, and priests replaced shamans. Offerings turned into ceremonies, whispers became prayers. With civilization came complexity, and with complexity came theology, the attempt to define, categorize, and control the divine. The gods, once wild and boundless, were given laws, families, and hierarchies. Yet even as their forms became grander, carved in stone, painted in gold, sung in hymns, their essence remained ancient. They were still the same presences our ancestors felt in the rustle of leaves, the crack of thunder, the birth of a child. Only now those presences had stories, voices, and faces that could be worshipped. The transformation was complete. Awe had become order. Myth had become religion. Humanity had taken the vast, unknowable mystery of existence and shaped it into something it could understand. Gods who walked, loved, wept, and warred as we did. And in doing so, we built not just temples of stone, but temples of meaning, sanctuaries within ourselves, where the ancient fire of awe still burned, reshaped but unextinguished. The spirits of the smoke had become kings of the heavens, and the whispers of the wind had become the first gods who ruled the heart of humankind. As humanity's cities reached higher and its empires stretched wider, something extraordinary happened. The gods, once free as wind and flame, began to take residence in stone. The stories once whispered around campfires became scripture, and the songs of the spirit turned into hymns of devotion. Awe, which had once been wild and personal, now had a structure. Belief had evolved into religion. At first, this transformation was an act of preservation. People needed ways to keep their sacred traditions alive across generations. Oral tales became written myths, sacred gestures became rituals, rituals became laws. What was once felt became formalized. With writing came permanence, and permanence brought power. The divine could now be recorded, remembered, and enforced. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets bore the first sacred texts, hymns to Inanna, goddess of love and war, and stories of Gilgamesh, who sought immortality among the gods. These myths were more than tales. They were guides for living, moral compasses encoded in story. The priests became interpreters of divine will, bridging the gap between the mortal and the eternal. Religion had become a social architecture, a framework that unified cities and empires under a shared sky. In Egypt, priests tended to the gods as if they were kings, ensuring the harmony of Ma'at, cosmic order. The temples were designed as mirrors of creation, their walls covered in prayers and star maps. Worship was precision, discipline, and beauty. The divine had entered the realm of governance. Faith became the foundation of civilization itself. As centuries passed, belief systems intertwined. In the crossroads of empires, the gods began to merge. Cultures traded not only goods but deities. Ishtar became Astarte, Zeus became Jupiter, Ra merged with Horus. The divine was not static. It evolved through contact, conquest, and curiosity. In this fusion, religion became both universal and personal, adaptable, surviving through transformation. But as human societies expanded, a new idea emerged, one that would forever alter the path of belief, the idea of one God. Monotheism was not born overnight. It grew out of the ancient yearning for unity, for an ultimate source behind all creation. From the hymns of Egypt's short-lived sun worship under Akhenaten to the moral monotheism of the Hebrew prophets, the divine began to narrow its form but deepen its meaning. The universe, once filled with countless spirits, was now seen as the design of a single, invisible intelligence, one that demanded not sacrifice, but faith. This shift changed everything. The gods were no longer confined to mountains or temples. They became universal, transcendent, everywhere and nowhere. The divine was no longer a presence to be seen, but a principle to be believed in. Religion, once polyphonic, began to harmonize into a single melody, one voice that claimed to speak for all creation. And yet, in every corner of the world, echoes of the old beliefs persisted. In the jungles of Africa, the spirits still whispered in rivers and trees. In the Arctic, shamans still sang to the sky. In the East, Hinduism and Taoism preserved the idea that the divine flows through all things, countless yet connected. Humanity's spiritual evolution was not a straight line. It was a great web of ideas, stretching from the caves of our ancestors to the cathedrals of modern faith. With organization came consequence. Faith gave comfort and community, but it also gave power. Religion unified nations but could divide hearts. Kings ruled by divine right. Wars were waged in the name of gods. Belief, once the soft language of awe, became the sharp tongue of ideology. And yet, even in its most rigid form, the human yearning for meaning never disappeared. Beneath doctrine and dogma, the same ancient pulse remained. A desire to connect with something larger than life, something infinite and ineffable. Through all its transformations, from smoke to scripture, from many gods to one, the essence of belief has always been the same: to find purpose in the mystery, to turn chaos into story, to make sense of being alive. Because behind every temple, every prayer, every holy word, there still burns the same eternal fire. The one our ancestors once gathered around, staring into the darkness, feeling that something vast was watching back. And so belief evolved, not as a straight ascent, but as a spiral, forever returning to the same sacred question: what does it mean to be human in a universe that breathes like a god? Though the temples have crumbled and the ancient names have faded into dust, their voices still move through us. The gods of old were never truly buried. They transformed. Beneath our modern lives, beneath the language of science and reason, their echoes still hum in the chambers of our collective soul. When we marvel at the cosmos, we speak again to the Sky Father. When we nurture life, we honor the Earth Mother. When we tell stories of heroes, villains, and rebirth, we retell the myths our ancestors once whispered by firelight. The first gods never left us. They became the patterns of our minds, the archetypes that shape our dreams and art. Psychologists call them archetypes, the primal symbols that live within every human consciousness. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the destroyer, the creator. They are not merely ideas. They are the living descendants of ancient deities, surviving not in temples, but in our imagination. The same force that once inspired cave paintings now drives cinema, poetry, and music. Every story we tell is a ritual. Every song is an invocation. Humanity still worships, only now our altars are made of pixels and pages. Across the world, echoes of the first gods pulse beneath our cultures. In Christianity, the sacrifice and resurrection of Christ mirror the cycle of Osiris and the renewal of Ra. In Norse myth, Odin's quest for wisdom echoes the same longing that led Gilgamesh to the edge of immortality. In Hinduism, the dance of Shiva still holds the rhythm of the cosmos, just as it did when our ancestors painted spirals on stone to mimic the movement of stars. Even science, in its quest to understand creation, continues that ancient pursuit. Our telescopes are the new temples, our physicists the new priests, peering into the vast unknown in search of origin, order, and meaning. The language has changed, but the impulse is the same. We still seek connection with the infinite. The whispers of the first gods have not vanished. They've evolved into questions. They live in our curiosity, in our wonder, in our need to make sense of the unseen. Every time we look at the night sky and feel something indescribable stir within us, that is them, the ancestral chorus reminding us of where we came from. Perhaps the greatest truth of all is that the divine was never separate from us. From the beginning, the gods were mirrors, reflections of our fears, our hopes, our hunger for meaning. We shaped them from the clay of our imagination, but in doing so, they shaped us. They taught us to dream, to create, to search. We are the descendants of awe, the children of those who once whispered to the wind, prayed to fire, and danced with spirits. Our skyscrapers are their ziggurats. Our stories are their scriptures. Our longing for the sacred, that is their voice, still alive in us. So when we speak of the first gods, we are not speaking of relics or myths. We are speaking of a living inheritance, one that breathes through every human heart that has ever looked into the unknown and dared to call it divine. Because the gods were never just out there, they were always in here. And if we listen closely, we can still hear them, murmuring in the spaces between silence and stars. From fire to faith, from silence to song, the story of the gods is the story of us. Every myth carved in stone, every prayer spoken to the stars, was a reflection of our endless desire to understand. We did not find the gods by looking up, we found them by looking inward. The first divine whispers that echoed through forests and caves still hum beneath our modern noise. They remind us that belief is not bound by temples or names. It is born each time we feel wonder, each time we stare into the unknown and feel it stare back. Humanity's first gods were not creators apart from us. They were the shape of our awe, the reflection of our courage to imagine. And though their forms have changed, their fire still burns in every question we ask about who we are and why we exist. So as we listen to the whispers of the past, may we remember this: the gods never disappeared, they became us. If this journey moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of our ancient origins, where myth, memory, and meaning still intertwine.